From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
Welcome to Rise America. I'm Folake Adesugba. And let's get right into it. Voting has ended in a number of key U.S. states in midterm elections that both parties have called the most important ballots in the nation's history. Counting is underway in a number of states, Kentucky and Indiana, and polls have just closed in an array of other constituencies. At stake, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 Senate positions. Democrats are confident of stealing control of the House from the Republicans, but could struggle to overturn a conservative majority in the Senate. Now, immigration, the economy, women's issues, partisanship, all weighed heavily on voters' minds as they cast ballots to decide control of Congress and put Trumpism to the test. Though not on the ballot, the president looms large over Decision Day among both supporters and detractors.
I just understand that there are different things that need to be taken care of on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level, and I don't think that he or his cronies, these loud, boisterous types of attitudes that they have, are working well for our country. And hopefully we'll have a change at the end of the day here. We'll have some people who will be in place who will make some changes for the better.
This is an extremely important time in American life, and we really all have to come together and vote for what we feel is most important in our democracy, to save our democracy.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. How? Why? Because he's not fair, he lies, and he's racist.
Well, Arise American correspondent Lori Lade has been following all the results coming in, and she joins us now from our London studio. Now, counting is underway in Indiana and Kentucky. Have any trends emerged? Can you tell us that, Lori?
Yeah, a couple of trends, and things seem to be going at this point in the counting largely according to the early polls. There doesn't look to be anything that will prevent, so far, the Democrats from taking back control of the House of Representatives, as early polling predicted. A couple of victories in a few key races. CNN has already called I'm sorry for looking down, so many numbers, but CNN has called the Virginia 10th, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., for newcomer Jennifer Wexton. Now, it's not a complete surprise. Jennifer Wexton is a Democrat. Not a complete surprise that she was able to steal this seat from the two-term incumbent, a woman called Barbara Comstock. Hillary Clinton won the district in 2016, but this is one of the seats that the Democrats were targeting, and one of the seats the Democrats thought, okay, if we win this one, we may be in pretty good shape. Also in Virginia, but a little bit further south, the 7th District, Abigail Spanberger, an ex-CIA agent, is neck and neck with the incumbent Republican Dave Bratt. Now, this is another one of those seats that the Democrats targeted, thought if we can get this one, we're in good shape. And a third House race to keep an eye on, the Kentucky 6th, where Amy McGrath, a Marine fighter pilot, is running neck and neck with Andrew Barr. Andrew Barr won this district by 22 percentage points in the last midterm election. So if Amy McGrath is able to pull this off, it would be a good night for the Democrats. And notice how many female names I've just mentioned. More females, more women running for office. 400 congressional candidates are female. We've never seen that many run for office or for House office in the United States before. But in the Senate, things look better for the Republicans. The Republicans have pretty much counted on keeping control of the Senate, or were hoping to keep control of the Senate. And then we saw Donald Trump on the campaign trail he was targeting his support toward Senate races. Now, the Senate always looked an unlikely win for the Democrats. They needed to defend all of their seats and pick up 2 more. In Indiana, and that's a state that Donald Trump visited a lot, 4 times over the past couple of months, the Democrat Joe Donnelly is not doing particularly well, trailing by more than 10 percentage points his Republican candidate, his Republican challenger, Mike Braun. Now, if the Democrats cannot defend Senate seats that they already have, it makes it very, very difficult for them to contemplate taking control of the Senate. So at the moment, we're seeing Democrats on track to do well in House races, less well in the Senate. Now, Bill Nelson, Democratic candidate to keep his seat in the Senate, winning up by a couple of percentage points in Florida, but that still is too tight to call. While we're in Florida, let's check in with that controversial governor's race. Andrew Gillum, vying to become the first African-American governor of Florida, was up strongly with 55% of the vote early on. He's still in the lead, but with about 52% of the vote over Rick Scott, the former governor, bidding to become the Republican senator from Florida. Now, a grain of salt with these returns in Florida. Hillary Clinton did very, very well with early returns in Florida, ended up losing the state. So we're seeing Andrew Gillum up by a lot. His lead is sliding as more votes are coming in. So remember that Hillary Clinton did very well in early returns in Florida, but didn't end up winning the state. One final governor's race that we're keeping an eye on, and that's Stacey Abrams in the state of Georgia. She's vying to become the first African-American female governor of any state in the U.S. Early returns not showing a particularly good showing for Ms. Abrams, 34% of the vote with compared to Brian Kemp's 66% of the vote. Now, that's only with 5% of the vote counted, so that could change through the evening.
Wow, really interesting there. Seems like there's so much to keep up with, and yet nothing seems predictable at the moment. Now, what are voters most concerned about?
Well, there was a lot of exit polling even before the polls closed, asking voters exactly that. What are your biggest concerns? Remarkably, health care topped voters' concerns of both parties. Now, previously, we thought that it was Democratic voters who were most concerned about health care, but it turns out a plurality of voters in a number of different surveys said that health care was their top concern, followed by the economy, followed by immigration. That order changed depending on voter affiliation, but it is health care that is topping voters' concerns. Democrats tend to be a little stronger on health care, despite the fact that they haven't articulated a particularly cohesive health care plan. So that is the biggest concern for voters. Other things that exit pollsters spoke to voters about, things like how has Donald Trump affected your vote? 2/3 of voters said that Donald Trump had a big effect on their vote. Now, we don't know whether that was an effect to vote Republican or to vote Democrat, but it does show how Donald Trump, the most remarkable politician in the land, is affecting voters even though he is not on the ballot. The other thing that struck me is that about 2/3 of voters also said that they had made up their minds more than a month ago, which again may have something to do with the Donald Trump effect. One more thing that's striking is that about 2/3 of voters yet again said that they think that the economy in their particular state is in very good state. Yet very good shape. Yet 6 out of 10 voters told posters that they think the country is on the wrong track, and it's unusual to see that kind of a disconnect. Typically, when people feel good about the economy, they feel good about America's future in general. So unusual, is it paradoxical to see that kind of a disconnect?
Really interesting there. Now, we've been hearing stories of high turnout. What can you tell us, or is that still a bit too soon?
It's a little bit early, but there's one estimate of turnout by a group called the Election Product that's associated with the University of Florida. They're putting turnout at just under 45%, which by my calculations would be the highest since 1970 for a midterm election. In the last midterm election, we saw turnout at about 37%, had been 42% in 2010. So if those numbers were to be confirmed, highest turnout again for a midterm since 1960. And look, whatever you think about Donald Trump, if his gift to American politics in years to come is to increase turnout in non-presidential years, then he will have done something positive.
And so, Lori, now can you just tell us what are next results to expect?
Well, at the top of the next hour, in fact, top of the next hour or so, we're going to see polling close in most East Coast states, some of the most populous states, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. It'll be a couple of hours yet before we get Midwestern states and states on the West Coast. But I think that what we're seeing so far gives us a reasonable sense of where we might go. Democrats doing very well in House seats that they have targeted, doing less well in Senate seats that they would have hoped to have defended or won if they were to take over the Senate. But taking over the Senate was always going to be a very unlikely goal.
All right, thank you for all of that, Lori. Now, that was Rise News correspondent Lori Lade on the U.S. midterm elections. We'll check back in with him. We'll check back in with her later in the program as the results come in. Now, time for a quick break now, but there's still more ahead when we return, so please do stay with us.
Coast to coast. Every culture. Every angle. This is Rise America.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
There is nothing as symbolic as a door. It shuts to protect you and opens to give you much more. Everyone wants to succeed, not just count pennies. When life gets tough, I remember a few things. Difficulty and struggles are part of what life brings. Your strength comes from the support around you. A true friend believes in what you do, there to hold your hand through any weather. I found my partner, and we walked through doors together.
Diamond, your bank.
In a fast-paced world, you need the ability to make everything move at your own speed. Stay ahead and not miss anything. That's why I'm on More Life Complete, which lets me call everyone in Nigeria on all networks at just 15 kobo per second. You can also call any line in the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, India, China, and Malaysia too at just 15 kobo per second. And just when you think life can't get any easier, I get 15 free minutes to call anyone in the 9 Mobile family.
Just booked your ticket to London.
Before you think I've got a computer more life, I also get 15 minutes free browsing to catch up on sports updates and anything online. Now that's what I call the complete package.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
All right, welcome back to Rise America. I'm Folake Adesugba, and we're just going to listen to Virginia Democrat Tim Kaine, who's speaking from Falls Church, Virginia, following his midterm victory to win re-election to the U.S. Senate.
Isn't about ripping people's health care away from them either. It's about building a commonwealth and a nation where each of us has the chance to succeed. An opportunity to help make people's lives better, people in our communities, in our commonwealth, around the country, those who are here now, as well as the future generations who will be here later. And of course, none of that could be possible if it hadn't been for all of your hard work. You know, those are the things that drew our candidates into the races to begin with, and it is what is carrying them to victory tonight. People like Tim Kaine, who understand what true public service is about helping your fellow citizens and making life better for others around you. But again, none of that could have been possible if it hadn't been for your hard work, a lot of hard work and of thousands of Virginians, millions of Americans who have been powering this movement, who have worked so hard to keep hope alive these last couple of years. And it has been a lot of hard work. My son Tim is a field organizer, and Laura and I texted him early this morning and wished him good luck. He immediately responded back and he said, and he shouted it out, "It's not about luck, it's about hard work and democracy." And he was exactly right. He was exactly right. And all of you have been all about the hard work and democracy, knocking on doors, phone banking, making contributions, getting people to come out and vote. You all coming out and vote. You all have made the difference. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you for your energy and your support. And please welcome our fantastic Lieutenant Governor, Justin Fairfax.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ralph. Good evening, Virginia! Let's give it up for our great Attorney General, Mark Herring. Mark, thank you for your leadership, for all that you do, and our incredible governor, Ralph Northam. He is fantastic and has done incredible work. Ralph, thank you. And also, I want to thank every single one of you here tonight. You sent a statement that will be heard around the country and around the world about who we are, that we have chosen hope over fear. We've chosen love over hate. And when I saw those returns come back for our dear friend, Senator Tim Kaine at 7:01, I said, what took so long? Because you know what? Corey Stewart's day is done here in Virginia, and so is Donald Trump's. It is the beginning of the end of the Trump era in this country. And Virginia, you have a very special place in the history and the life of this nation. Because this blue wave, this blue tsunami, this wildfire progressive change started last year right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It was a very dark time after 2016. We felt like the lights had gone out in this nation and a darkness had come across our great country. But you answered the call of history in 2017. And you said we are going to go county by county, city by city, and now state by state, and turn the lights back on in America. You voted us in with the most votes in the history of the Commonwealth of Virginia. You said 15 members to the House of Delegates. You made Medicaid expansion possible, so 400,000 people now have health insurance in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and you're making that progress possible all over this nation. Everywhere that I have traveled, we've been to a number of states. I'm the chair of the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association. So we've been to the Midwest, the Southwest. We've been down to Georgia and Florida. By the way, Andrew Gillum's going to be next governor of Florida. Stacey Abrams will be the next governor of the great state of Georgia. And we're electing dynamic, progressive people all over this nation. But everywhere I've gone, people have said, thank you, Virginia, for giving us hope. We felt like this country was going to go down a dark political road, but you showed us what was possible, that we could reclaim our democracy and reclaim hope in this nation. So when we said last year that Virginia would be the match that sparks the wildfire of progressive change, that wildfire has now spread all across America. You are remaking this nation. You are rebirthing democracy in the place where it was first born. And so you should feel proud about what we have done tonight. I want to thank Jennifer Wexton, who's going to be an incredible member of Congress. I also want to thank Abigail Spanberger and our incredible candidates who have run and are winning all over Virginia and all over this nation. And so thank you to every single one of you for the heart, the talent, the time, the treasure, the sacrifices that you have made for this country.
All right, that was Tim Kaine, who just won re-election, a Democrat in Virginia. He's just won re-election into the Senate. And now we're going to go over to Laurie, who's been keeping track as well in our London studios, and find out what's happening. All right, Laurie, so we've just witnessed the re-election of Tim Kaine, a Democrat in Virginia. Now, do we have any reactions to that so far? What's the scene like? What are people saying?
Well, Tim Kaine's re-election was largely guaranteed. This was never going to be a closely fought race. Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016. He's very popular in the state of Virginia, so he didn't really face a tough battle. He's one of the few local officials who actually has national name recognition, and his opponent, Corey Stewart, was not a perfect candidate in a fairly progressive state like Virginia. He had openly admired Confederate monuments in the South, supported those, aligned himself very, very closely with Donald Trump. And as I say, Virginia is a fairly progressive state, so those views were probably unlikely to prevail in a statewide race. While they may be popular in certain districts in Virginia, they were never going to prevail statewide. So Tim Kaine's victory is not much of a surprise.
And now, just there, we heard they talked a lot about progressive people. And just to quote Lieutenant Ferre there, who said they're sort of leading the way to dynamic progressive people. Now, can you sort of speak to us about that? I recall you said a large number of women were running, and there's a chance Andrew Gillum in Florida and Stacey Abrams in Georgia could be the first African-American people in those constituencies. So can you sort of speak to us concerning dynamic progressive people?
That's a very good question, because progressive in much of U.S. society or right of center society, progressive is almost a dirty word. It's only one step away from socialist. Calling someone a progressive, at least in Republican circles, is a bit of an insult. And much of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is probably moving a little bit more quickly than the center of the Democratic Party. One of the most interesting things about this election to me is that the Republicans have run on national issues, almost a national ticket, aligning themselves with Donald Trump. Let's just go back to our last question a moment. I mentioned Corey Stewart, the imperfect Republican candidate in a state like Virginia. He aligned himself very closely with Donald Trump, a man who on the national stage, he looked at national issues. He took race on the head. Democrats, where they're doing well, tend to be running more on local issues, adjusting their views to the local constituencies. So a Democratic candidate in Montana, and we'll get those results much later in the night, is doing very well running on somewhat Republican policies. She supports gun rights. She supports tougher immigration, despite the fact that immigration is not a big deal in Montana. So progressive for a Democrat is almost a dirty word. The Democratic Party as a whole is grappling with itself about whether to be more centrist or whether to move to the left toward the more progressive wing. So it's interesting. It was very clever of you to pick up on Tim Kaine saying that, because progressive is not necessarily an appealing term for the broader electorate. It worked in Virginia. It may work in other places. It may work in Florida with Andrew Gillum, but it's a bit of a risky political space on which to pitch your tent.
And now, so does this make a difference in the Democrats' uphill battle to retain the Senate?
I don't think Tim Kaine, because his reelection was not a surprise, I don't think his reelection helps the Democrat hopes to retain the Senate. And I think those hopes were really dealt a very big blow by the heavy, heavy loss of Joe Donnelly in the state of Indiana. Mike Braun, the Republican challenger, leading Joe Donnelly by quite a bit. If the Democrats can't defend seats, it's going to be very difficult for them to pick up the seats that they need to take over the Senate.
And Lori, can you tell us what the results are looking like in the House races in Virginia?
Well, there things look a little bit rosier for the Democrats. Two progressive, again that word, progressive female candidates doing reasonably well. Jennifer Wexton already won a district very on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., defeating another female candidate. So that will definitely help the Democrats' hopes to take over the House of Representatives. In a southern district outside of Richmond, the state capital of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, an ex-CIA agent, running neck and neck with Dave Brat, the Republican incumbent. That is one of the seats that the Democrats were hoping to flip to take over the House of Representatives. That could have been a runaway race. Dave Brat, again, the two-term incumbent, but he is being run in quite a close race by Abigail Spanberger. I don't have the latest results on that. Last I looked at it, very tight race, but if the Democrats were to take that seat, I think they'd feel very optimistic about their chances of taking back the House of Representatives.
It seems things are really, really tense over there in terms of how tight the race is going. And just before I let you go, Lori, can you tell us if you have any other updates?
The Spanberger was the most interesting thing. We still have sorry, there's so many races that I'm keeping an eye on. The Kentucky, gosh, I'm so sorry about this. The Kentucky race, Amy McGrath, sorry, I lost that one. Still neck and neck with Andy Barr, who won that seat by 22 points. That's another one of the seats that the Democrats are hoping to pick up if they're going to take the House of Representatives. Andrew Gillum still leading in Florida, again another progressive candidate, but that gap is getting smaller and smaller as more votes are coming in. Also neck and neck with another Senate race there, Bill Nelson up a tiny bit against Rick Scott, the former Republican governor, now running for Senate. That is another seat that the Democrats would have to defend if they want to take over the Senate, although with that devastating loss in Indiana, that looks quite unlikely.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for Lori. Thank you so much for all of that. You're an absolute gem for keeping up with all of those details. And Facebook is blocking more than 100 accounts which it claims may be engaged in trying to influence the midterm elections which are underway in the US today. The world's largest social network says it has blocked 30 Facebook accounts and 85 Instagram accounts as part of the early stages of its latest investigation into disinformation on the platform. The company said US law enforcement had informed it that authorities had discovered online activity they believed might be linked to foreign entities. And pipe bomb suspect Cesar Siok has been ordered to be held without bail in New York. Siok made his first court appearance in federal court in Manhattan following his transfer from Florida. He faces charges for allegedly mailing more than a dozen explosive devices to prominent Democrats, CNN, and critics of Republican President Donald Trump. Prosecutors say the most recent crude bomb was recovered on Friday in California, addressed to liberal activist Tom Steyer. Prosecutors told a judge that Sayok presents a flight risk and is a serious danger to the public. Elsewhere, Iran's foreign minister said his country will make sure its people are least affected by U.S. sanctions that were restored on Monday. In a video message released, Mohammad Javad Zarif called the sanctions draconian and an indiscriminate assault on his country. Zarif urged America to re-examine its catastrophes in the Middle East, including its support for Saudi Arabia and Israel.
The U.S. administration appears to believe that imposing illegal draconian sanctions on Iran will bring about such pain to our nation that it will force us to submit to its will, no matter how absurd, unlawful, or fundamentally flawed its demands are. We have weathered difficult times in the face of 40 years of American hostility, relying solely on our own resources. And today, we and our partners across the globe will ensure that our people are least affected by this indiscriminate assault in the economic warfare that directly targets the Iranian people, notwithstanding hypocritical claims by the Trump administration to the contrary. But rather than relying on its discredited addiction to unilateralism and sanctions as tools of statecraft, which are today pushing it further into global isolation, the U.S. is better off addressing the catastrophes and crises it has engineered in our region. Where to begin? In 1953, or in Afghanistan, where the U.S. created Al-Qaeda to fight the Soviets, or Iraq, where it supported Saddam Hussein, including his use of chemical weapons against Iran, or the later invasion of Iraq to supposedly rid Saddam of those very weapons of mass destruction? Or is it that the long-standing and unconditional support for two clients, Saudi Arabia and Israel, blinds the U.S. to their appalling atrocities that have resulted in global indignation and engendered insecurity to us all, the U.S. itself included? Taking a long, hard look at its own wrong choices and changing in its approach from a failed one it has stubbornly followed for decades, instead of prescribing behavioral changes for Iran, will be far more effective in bringing about resolution to conflict and crises that have bedeviled the Middle East for far too long. President Trump's predecessors also began crafting their Iran policy with similar bravado, but came around to accepting and respecting the reality of Iran as they became more experienced in office. My name is Javad Zarif, and this is Iran's message.
Meanwhile, National Security Advisor John Bolton had words of warning for what was to come under President Donald Trump's decision to reimpose sanctions on Iran that once were lifted under the 2015 nuclear deal between the two countries.
The president's policy here is maximum pressure, and I think what he means by maximum pressure is maximum pressure. The aim is to drive Iranian oil exports to zero. We're working with other countries to get alternative supplies for countries that are buying, and I think that's critical over an extended period of time. But let's be clear, we're going to have sanctions that even go beyond this. We're not simply going to be content with the level of sanctions that existed under Obama in 2015. More are coming, and even more important, perhaps, is we are actually going to have very strict, very tight enforcement of the sanctions that do exist. Iran right now is in the escape and evasion mode. They're going to try and get around the sanctions. We're determined to prevent that. This is what I would say to American companies and any foreign company that wants to do business in the United States. And I'd say it particularly to their investors and to their independent directors on their boards of directors. If you see your company engaged in a transaction that has the word Iran anywhere associated to it, it ought to be like a fire bell in the night.
And in a sad turn of events, a young couple from Texas were killed when a helicopter carrying them away from their own wedding crashed late on Saturday night, according to officials. Will Byler and Bailey Ackerman Byler were both students at Sam Houston State University. Their deaths were first reported by the student newspaper. The crash occurred near Uvalde, about 85 miles west of San Antonio. On social media, wedding attendees have been posting their condolences in the captions of wedding photos. Well, time for a quick break now, but more ahead when we return, so please stay with us.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Nigeria. We are 198 million productive people with over 900,000 square kilometers of fertile land. Nigeria's banking system has emerged strong and resilient from the 2016 crisis, which has enhanced our productivity in agribusiness and manufacturing. Come, invest in Nigeria's agribusiness, manufacturing, and value-added mining. Enjoy the Central Bank of Nigeria-led initiatives in funding interventions, stabilized exchange rate, friendly capital repatriation regime, and many more. The Central Bank of Nigeria's robust monetary policy and interventions under President Buhari's administration and position the economy to target and attain a GDP growth of 6% with a strong and growing external reserves. Come, invest in Nigeria. Nigeria, ready for business.
As a fashion writer, I know how quickly trends are created and changed. In business, it's no different. To stay ahead, I needed a plan flexible enough to meet my changing communication needs. More Business 2.0 didn't just give me voice and data in one package. I got a whole lot more. With More Business, setting up my website was no problem. But I'm not just a fashion writer. I also own a home decor store before I decided to open an accessory store. With my customized More Business plan, managing my staff's communication is easy. No matter how frequently they come or they go. With 9 Mobile's new online self-service this week, I could adapt my plans to include this.
From 2,000 Naira, choose a business bundle, customize your staff's voice and data lines, and enjoy a variety of add-on business services. Dial *200*5# now to subscribe. More business.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
Welcome back to Arise America. I'm Folake Adesugba. Now, more than 200 mass graves containing thousands of bodies have been found in areas of Iraq that were once controlled by the Islamic State group, a UN investigation has found. The graves were found in the north and western governorates of Nineveh, Kirkuk, Saludin, and Anbar. They could contain as many as 12,000 victims, the UN report said. IS seized parts of Iraq in 2014 and imposed brutal rule, commonly killing any one of whom it disapproved. It was eventually vanquished by a US-led air campaign backed by Iraqi government forces and allied militias on the ground, although pockets of IS activity remain in some areas.
100 mass graves containing the remains of thousands of victims have been discovered in areas formerly controlled by ISIL in Iraq, according to a UN report that we have released today. The report highlights the legacy of ISIL's relentless campaign of terror and violence and the victims' continued calls for truth and justice. While it is difficult to determine the total number of people in these graves, the smallest site in West Mosul contained 8 bodies, while the biggest is believed to be the Kasfa sinkhole south of Mosul, which may contain thousands. And meaningful truth and justice requires that these sites be appropriately preserved, excavated, and exhumated, and the identification of the remains of the many victims and their return to the families.
And an army search operation is underway in Cameroon to rescue dozens of people kidnapped from a boarding school. A government official said at least 79 students and 3 others were seized on Monday in Bamenda, the capital of the Northwest region. The government and English-speaking separatists have accused each other of orchestrating the kidnapping. Cameroon's northwest and southwest regions have been hit by secessionist rebellion in recent years. Regional Governor Adolphe Lele Lafrique de Ben Tushofo blamed separatist militias for the kidnapping. But English-speaking separatists are accusing the government of staging the kidnapping as an attempt to discredit their cause. The authorities have declared a ban on vehicles driving between most districts of the northwest region.
Despite what happened here, the state government will not surrender. We are going to make sure the students, the people that were abducted, are brought back to the classrooms. Measures are being taken by the security men in that regard. They have provoked. There are raping, killing, looting, abducting, but they are going to face a strong, powerful reaction by the powers that be, not only here in Bamenda, but elsewhere in the northwest region.
The glasses are still there on the ground. Then in the dormitories, without fright, some of the students started packing their belongings. And in the boys' dormitory, 2 doors were actually broken. So they have taken students from Form 3, Form 4, Form 5, lower C and upper C.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made a visit to Afghanistan today, holding talks with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and other senior officials. At a joint news conference afterwards, Stoltenberg said it was in NATO countries' interest to remain in Afghanistan to increase their own security as well as that of Afghanistan itself. NATO has around 16,000 troops in the country to train and support local forces. Violence has been escalating in recent months as a resurgent Taliban hold nearly half of Afghanistan with near daily attacks on Afghan security forces.
My message to leaders back in, to political leaders back in Europe, in the United States, to NATO allies and partners, is that we are here in Afghanistan, of course, to help Afghanistan, but we're also in Afghanistan to help ourselves. We are here to fight international terrorism, and we have seen before how damaging and how dangerous and how dangerous that can be for our own societies. There is no way I can go back to Europe or to the United States, NATO allies and partners, and say that it didn't exactly go as we expected, so now we should leave. That would be the total wrong approach. We are here because it is in our interest to be here to increase our own security.
We hope that the day of beginning formal negotiations would not be far, but it's not negotiation, it's the results. The result has to be an inclusive Afghan peace that all Afghans buy into, and again, this will be an inclusive process. We support the engagement of our international colleagues.
And here in Nigeria, and Britain's Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, were greeted by President Muhammadu Buhari at the presidential villa in Abuja. The Prince of Wales also attended a meeting with traditional leaders at the High Commissioner's residence, where he received a book as a gift from the Emir of Kano. The visit marks the final leg of the royal couple's 7-day trip to West Africa.
Much as we have good intentions around issues like domestic violence and child rights and demography, there are also conversations that perhaps we're not ready for at this point in time, and that should not be mixed into these conversations. So overall, I think it was a very interesting conversation, and some traditional rulers like the owner of Ife talked about his program with youth empowerment. The Sheikh of Borno spoke about Boko Haram. The Oba of Benin spoke about some of his housing project. The Obi of Onitsha spoke about poverty. The Obi being a former banker and me being a former banker obviously talked about poverty and the economy. And the Sultan made a general comment about the importance of traditional rulers for national unity. So that was basically the conversation.
All right, well, time for a quick break now, but more ahead when we return, so please do stay with us.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
There is a reason Africa is called the new frontier. What was once potential is now an opportunity ready to be seized. Once revered for our resources, today's wealth lies in our people. People who build the cities that shape the future. People who know an idea in one place means business in another. A generation for whom technology means there are no borders, no boundaries. We are the new lions in a brave new world, kings of the urban jungle. And there's a bank that puts the world in our pocket and the future in our hands. UBA, Africa's global bank.
Nigeria. We are 198 million productive people with over 900,000 square kilometers of fertile land. Nigeria's banking system has emerged strong and resilient from the 2016 crisis, which has enhanced our productivity in agribusiness and manufacturing. Come, invest in Nigeria's agribusiness, manufacturing, and value-added mining. Enjoy the Central Bank of Nigeria-led initiatives in funding interventions, stabilized exchange rate, friendly capital repatriation regime, and many more. The Central Bank of Nigeria's robust monetary policy and interventions under President Buhari's administration and position the economy to target and attain a GDP growth of 6% with a strong and growing external reserves. Come, invest in Nigeria. Nigeria, ready for business.
From coast to coast, every culture, every angle. This is Arise America.
All right, let's go back now to the top story for the day, which is the midterm elections. Our correspondent, Lori Lade, has been following events, and she joins me now for the latest. Now, Lori, some shocking news out of Texas. What can you tell us? What's going on?
This could be the story of the evening. Democratic Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke, who came out of nowhere, burst onto the national stage only a couple of months ago in early voting in Texas, is ahead of Ted Cruz, the Republican incumbent. Now, Ted Cruz has national name recognition. He ran for president, but he was being run quite close by Beto O'Rourke in the latter part of the campaign. In fact, Donald Trump, who called Ted Cruz Lying Ted when he was running against him in the Republican primaries, was actually drafted in to campaign on Ted Cruz's behalf. In very early counting, Beto O'Rourke has the lead. Now, we have seen a number of races this evening where leads have turned around after more votes are counted, so we'll keep an eye on that. But absolutely shocking news out of Texas, and it means that the Democrats could take a Senate seat if these results are confirmed, could take a Senate seat that they weren't counting on.
Just quickly before I let you go there, does this give Democrats any hope of retaking the Senate?
Probably not, because another Senate seat held by a Democrat in Indiana, by Claire McCaskill, early votes show her to be behind her Republican opponent, Josh Hawley, by something along the lines of 25 points. Now, only 2% of the vote has been counted there, but it would be very difficult for her to make up that kind of a margin as votes are counted. So that's one that the Democrats hold, but will probably lose. So pollsters are looking at an 89% chance of Republicans retaining the Senate on current form.
All right, thank you so much, Lori. Well, that's all for this edition of Arise America. I'm Folake Adesugba. Thank you for being a part of the program, and thank you so much for Lori Laird over there for all the information. Goodbye for now.
This is Arise America.